Hello to everyone. Today I will explain you my topic of EcoSquare. Nowadays, the impact of technological growth on people's life and our society is remarkable and inevitable. It has caused our community to change towards more privatization and scheduled life. At this point, the role of urban public spaces in social life has become more significant. This research raises the question of considering urban spaces and how urban public squares can encourage citizens to increase social interaction. Initially, it provides a definition of public squares through the comprehension of the history and remarking significant rules and functions of urban squares. Thereafter, the research addresses factors from the human-urban perspective which can help to achieve a successful design of a public square through the classification of a square in relation to the space and function. Then, specific sustainable criteria are analyzed to understand how a square could serve urban life efficiently and improve quality of users. Lastly, a number of case of study are proposed for public squares through the description, images, and their social and cultural impact of the life of citizens. Some keywords of this work can be urbanism of open spaces, historical analysis of public squares, new squares as social spaces, sustainable open spaces, impact on the citizens, and relationship of square with society. So public squares are one of the significant open public spaces in the urban environment, which reflect the city's identity and the community's cultural background. They represent a place where people of the community come together and urban life takes place since the ancient times. As the fundamental component of the city structure, urban squares contribute to the image and prestige of the city. In the last few decades, many urban squares have lost their function and role due to the changes in use of public spaces. So designing urban squares as both public and open spaces now require more importance and attention, and it should be a part of urban design. Otherwise, they become disconnecting and meaningless rather than being an integral part of the city. About the historical path of squares, the first city formation appeared 6 years ago, and city squares were established at the crossroad of important trade routes. A well-known earliest example of today's public square is the Greek agora, that was an open place in the city center where political, social, and economical activities took place. Similarly, the Roman Forum was a large open space where people gathered for political, economical, and social activities. It was the combination of agora and agropolis since it included more activities with more formal order. Then, in the neoclassical period, there were some apparent changes in city morphology, and with the changing economical, political, and philosophical perspective, approaches to planning and design of the town shifted with the influence of rationalization during the Renaissance. So, symmetry and order were the essential principle in design of the squares, and Italian squares are the well-known example of the Renaissance public squares, with the monuments and fountains that were added to the design to create aesthetically pleasing environments. And an example is Piazza del Campidoglio in Rome, designed by Michelangelo. In the 19th century, Industrial Revolution caused a dramatic change in urban design and planning. So the establishment of broad railways network led to population increase in urban areas, which stimulated the growth of cities. The emergence of shopping streets, bazaars, and department stores created a new form of public space. And at the end of the 19th century, concern for environmental deterioration and community well-being triggered the parks movement. Instead of street square, huge green areas emerged as new public spaces. And population increase in urban areas continued during the 20th century, and cities became more and more expanding, heterogeneous, and fragmented. In addition, private cars ownership showed a rapid increase, and cities became more vehicle-dominant environment. As a result, pedestrian movement and freedom were limited. And in the second half of the 20th century, many urban squares turned into crossroads, especially in developing countries. Then, an example of the new urban public space in nowadays is the Park Library of the Trees in Milan, in Italy, that offers an open park, an inclusive place that involves the community in the care of greenery and a cultural program inspired by sustainability. Chapter 3 talks about rules and functions of urban squares. And we can see that function activities in square are important for their vitality, and therefore the visual attractiveness plays a substantial role. And according to Montfort, primary function of cities is the acculturation and humanization of its inhabitants, and for this purpose, public spaces are the essential tool in the city. Kostov defines some basic functions of the urban squares as being a part of transport system, commercial activities, games and sports, and in addition, public square provides citizens with places for leisure and outdoor activities, and also have ecological benefit to the human and urban environment. And well-designed public squares increase the visual landscape value and contribute to environmental aesthetic value. And in addition, urban public squares also provide some economical benefit for the community. It's a well-known fact that existing of open and green areas increase the real estate prices nearby. And the example is Times Square in New York. And we can say that besides the physical and ecological rules, public squares contribute to the social cohesion and social identity. They act like a social catalyst and have a symbolic meaning of coexistence. So, citizens from different social, economical, and cultural background, age, and group all have equal accessibility to the public spaces. And urban squares are one of these public spaces where individuals and groups learn to respect and tolerate others. So urban squares are the places where the social interaction and social cohesion occurs. And the way and the context of this social interaction displays the local identity. In addition, many public squares have also historical value for the city's identity, and they usually reflect the collective values of the community. All these rules and functions of urban public squares contribute to the well-being of individuals and also of the communities. So it's important to reconsider and review urban public squares design approaches in order to sustain and improve our existing squares or create enjoyable new ones. About the classification of squares, we can say that form refers to the basic physical shape of the square, as if the square were an open container whose volume is defined by its bottom, that is the ground, its sides, that can be buildings or trees, and the open ceiling, so the sky. In order to understand more easily the physical forms of the square, it's useful to establish a general classification of types that can be widely applicable. So public squares could be classified by geometrical ground plan, by size, by location, by function, and so on. And Paul Zucker, an authority on the square as an urban art form, has chosen the aspect of space and how it is aesthetically unified as a basis for classification. In addition, a functional classification of a square has the disadvantage of requiring reclassification, as the uses of a square may change during time. For example, a market square may become a parking lot. So the form is as permanent as those elements that create it. And usually these elements are building and so remain for many years. Public squares so can be classified as following: user Zucker's category. Firstly, the closed square, and an example is Plaza Mayor in Madrid. That is a place of architecture with an open central square with an equestrian state at as the point of interest. And this simplest form of public square is closely related in design to the architectural concept of the atrium of a Roman house. Another category is the dominated square, in which the dominant feature can be, for example, a church, a palace, or a city hall, and or, for example, an open vista, which acts like a magnet to attract the perspective of the square. For example, we can take in example the Notre Dame Cathedral and Pavilions of Paris. The third category is the nuclear square, in which the spatial unity of public squares is not necessarily dependent upon their architectural or natural boundaries, but any element which is visually strong and large enough in size to form a focus within the space of the square by acting as a nucleus to the square. An example is Trafalgar Square in London. And another category is the grouped square. They were axially oriented in numerous Roman and Baroque examples. So there are many means to achieve aesthetics unity between one square and another, and the space of a groups of square may be arranged through civic design, just as a sculptor molds separate figures into a group sculpture. So this image indicates the ancient Roman concept of grouped squares, in which 5 forums are directly related to axis and common side, yet they maintain their individuality through porticos and walls, which provide interconnecting passageways. And in each case, the size and proportion of the separate four vary. The last category is the harmonious square, and this is the term used to describe and classify all those so-called squares, which are, from an aesthetic point of view, formless. So, in order to clarify the meaning of the term square, this variation must be mentioned to indicate that many open spaces formally have the title of square, even though they are just a crossroad, such as, for example, New York's Times Square. So each square can be easily categorized as closed, dominated, nuclear, or grouped, and can be qualified as multiple classification. We can consider the case of Piazza San Pietro in Rome, in Italy, and that show how this plaza can be classified as each of closed, nuclear, dominated, and grouped. Then we can have a functional classification, in which we can say that every square has a number of purpose and social function that relate to the very ethos of community. So, because the social function of the square extends to such a comprehensive range of urban activity, a functional classification has been devised by G.M. Peter to describe the social function of squares. So we can classify four types of functional classification. The first one is the internal functional square. This is the most rudimentary of the types, and its function relative to the other types outlined below is independent and self-centered. It's the site for a single or combination of activity that can include a meeting place for a formal assembly, a public gathering, a marketplace, a place for the grazing and storage of domestic animals, a park for the use and enjoyment of surrounding properties. And maybe the most common example of the internal function square is the marketplace, which is very important in every community. Second category is the associative functional square. This is the most easily recognizing due to the some dominant building or landscape feature, and we can classify other categories within this functional classification that can be the Civic Square, for example, Nathan Phillips Square in Toronto, the Church Square, for example, Piazza San Marco in Venice, and the Palace Square, for example, Red Square in Moscow. Another category is the arterial node functional square, that is a crossroad. It's developed not only as the intersection of street, but also as a public square. Its functionality depends upon the circulation route that meets there and may also include large pedestrian areas. An example is Place de l'Étoile in Paris. And another category is the multiple function square. That is the most complex, the most comprehensive and elusive to define. We can say that its internal functions are not the regular formalized activity of a marketplace, but it's a general purpose public open space in the heart and the core of the community. An example can be Centennial Square in Athens. So, talking about the sustainable urban public squares, we can say a square is a mixed-use and multidimensional environment where all kinds of activity, including social, political, religious, and environmental and economical activity, are taking place there. So it's necessary to investigate how an urban square could be sustainable and serve the sustainability of urban communities. Sustainable development is the issue dealing with the new methods and technique in which using resources in terms of society, economy, and environment are optimized. So, when is a square environmentally sustainable? There is a conceptual model consists to reach sustainability of urban public squares that evaluated three factors of physical, sociocultural, and ecological. In terms of physical aspect, because squares are public space that provided for gathering and various types of activities, so physical aspect included facilities and amenities which make the square a place of relaxing and joy. And regarding to physical aspect, of each urban squares, we should to consider for sure the size, also the accessibility, the furnitures, the beauty, and in terms of ecological aspect, we can say that due to the rapid growth of urban communities, the issues of microclimate and temperature in urban public space have been influenced. So ecological aspects are important in designing urban squares because they are very vulnerable about weather conditions. This is to say the usage of urban squares is dependent to users' thermal comfort, wind comfort, and sun comfort. Since a square is ecologically comfortable, it can attract visitors and users and consequently give benefits to the city life. So following factors represent the ecological aspect of a sustainable urban squares: thermal comfort, wind comfort, and sun comfort. Then, when is a square socially sustainable? Social sustainability refers to strategies in which social cohesion and social interaction are emphasized. So there are different definitions for social sustainability, such as the ground of equity and democracy, addressing basic needs, and preserving social values and tradition. However, there is a consensus which introduces social sustainability as a combination of underlying themes, which provide social and human well-being. It's important to know that political and economic situation have also always had a profound influence on social sustainability. So, to understand the meaning of social sustainability in urban public squares, the following issues are considered. First of all, identity. Then, visual, mental comfort and livability. And also equality and safe and security and flexibility in activities. And now we can talk the when is a square economically sustainable. Urban public squares have also been a tool for subsistence of many people. So well-designed squares are a destination for many tourists, as long as social activities and physical aspects of each square are systematic and useful. Economy of the urban square is more secured. Urban squares should be commercially oriented to contribute to the economical profit and economical growth. In other words, to make sure that the square is economically sustainable, there has to be a good management and monitoring to support the diversity of social interaction and physical structures. Therefore, social, cultural, ecological aspect of urban square will lead to a vibrant economy development, which is based on local self-reliance rather than government resources. Urban policy makers try to enhance the quality of urban public space and living environment due to attract investment and economic boost. The following are some examples around the world about squares that I will better explain in the matrix. So here we can see the images of San Marco Square in Italy, in Venice, Piazza di Spagna in Rome, Italy, and Taksim Square in Istanbul, Turkey. Red Square, Moscow, Russia. Maiden Square in Ukraine. Illyria Square in Albania. And Eleftheria Square in Cyprus. Tapis Rouge in Haiti. and Israel squares in Denmark. And Sovraparco, a project in Milan, Italy. Tetris Square in China. And Superkillen in Denmark, Copenhagen. So, today, as public spaces decline, concerns for the vitality and livability of the cities increase. And people are the main ingredient of the city, and without public space, it's impossible to establish a physical and mental connection between public and urban environment. So, urban public space have been negatively affected by globalization and privatization. Furthermore, increasing individualism has caused social fragmentation within the communities, which present itself in the changing use of public spaces. And also, internet has become a major component of our daily lives. And in addition, its economical, educational, and time-saving benefits, it has also dramatically changed public life. Internet has created a virtual environment where people prefer to spend their time rather than going out. So, social relations are necessary for the cohesion of community and local and national identity. In this context, urban public space are important venues for creating social relations between people. As one of the significant open public spaces, urban squares are fundamental elements of democratic and livable cities. Therefore, it's needed to recreate and design urban square to simulate the public life and establish a social cohesion. So, urban public squares are more than just physical spaces. They have symbolic meaning for people, they are vibrant, active, and interesting places. In addition, most of the contemporary urban squares involve a historical value of importance for the community, as well as for tourists and visitors. So we should realize that urban public squares are essential for enhancing city image and community development. And here we can see a list of references for this work. So in the matrix are explained all the squares that I mentioned before with the ecological criteria. Firstly, I identified city, years, and total area. As ecological criteria, I identify mobility, field of use, important by building around, water use, waste recycling management, and energy efficiency usage. Then biodiversity, preventing noise pollution, wind comfort, shadow, and sun, and green area paving relation, and amenities, accessibilities, and then I took some images of the project and the SWOT analysis. For example, for San Marco Square, we can say that some point of strength that can be that is a tourist art attraction, is free access to all, and is a social cultural life. Some weakness can be the lack of shading elements and seating facilities and elements. Some opportunities can be, for example, that the location of the square is close to important religious, political, and cultural buildings. And some threat can be the air and noise pollution. And also the square is completely sunny. For Piazza di Spagna, there are the same ecological criteria and the SWOT analysis. For example, we can say that some strength points can be the accessibility by walk, bicycle, and public transport. Some weakness point can be the limit access for disabled people and no biodiversity. Some opportunities can be that is possible the location can be improved with more green areas, and some trade can be again iron noise pollution. For Taksim Square, some strength point can be, for example, that is main transportation hub, and some weakness can be that is most of the square is in concrete materials, and some opportunities can be that the location of the square is close to most of the European side of Istanbul, and some trade can be air noise pollution, and also that the location can have limit access to disabled people. For Red Square, for example, some strength can be that is close to traffic, therefore is for passage. And some opportunities, for example, can be that it's possible to create a fantastic atmosphere at night, and there are a lot of tourists. For Maiden Square, some strength can be that, for example, that is a tourist attraction place and is a multicultural accessible by walk, bicycle, and public transport. And some opportunities can be that the location can be improved with more green areas. And for Illyria Square, some, for example, point of weakness can be that there is no biodiversity, and some traits can be that the square is completely sunny, and the location can have limited access to disabled people. And for Eleftheric Square, some point of strength can be that is a multicultural place and in have an historic meaning. And some opportunities can be that there are a lot of tourists, and it's one of the main tourist attractions of the city. For Tapis Rouge Square, some point of strength can be that there is a water distribution station, it's a multicultural place, and there are playground and leisure activities. Some weakness can be that the location can have limited access to disabled people, and there are no access with vehicle and public transport. For Israeli squares, some point of strength can be that there is a parking area, is a multicultural place, and also here there are playground and leisure activity. But there are no renewable energy uses, and some opportunities can be that it can revitalize history of the place. For the project Sovraparco, some strength can be that it's an important central hub of Emilian. Biodiversity protector from the air noise and sound pollution, and is equipped with stories, coffee shop, and also amenities. Some opportunities can be the social life point, and also can improve the built environment and the quality of air. For Tetris Square, some point of strength can be that is a flexible user space, the biodiversity is present and protect from the air noise and sound pollution, is equipped with the shopping mall, apartments and offices, and have playground activity and sitting areas, and is accessible by walk, bicycle, vehicle, and public transport. Maybe some trades can be that there are many shopping malls. And for Superkillen, some point of strength can be that is an international quarter with 60 different cultures, and is equipped with a collection of global found objects, and there are playground activity and relaxing areas. Some opportunities can be the social life point and the aims to enhancing different culture with the site. And some trades can be that there are some dangerous rules on the sides. The second part of my work regards the project that I make for an eco square, and these are some keywords: urbanism of open space, sustainable open space and square, inclusive and safe space, and suburban district. So, firstly, I'm mentioning some information about the urban context, and I talked about Istanbul, that is one of the biggest metropolitans of both Europe and Asia, and I mentioned some information about the historical and the cultural background of Istanbul. And here we can see an image that shows the age of building of Istanbul. And then I talked about the location, that is Kartal, and is a big city on the way to become a metropolis. And we can say that is one of the districts that have the largest industrial area of Istanbul. And the transportation opportunities encourage intensive construction activity since 1970s. And it's a district located in the Asian side of Istanbul. And the neighbor districts are, for example, Maltepe, and Kadikoy and Pendik, and Kartal, that has an urban and rural part, is consisting in 25 quarters. 20 of these quarters are in the central, and 5 of them are in the rural area of Samandra location. Here I talk about the history of Kartal, and I make a site analysis about firstly the population, the topography, the soil, then fauna and flora. And there are some information about the climate in Kartal city, and so I talked about the sun and wind, and also about the green belt ratio, traffic and transport conditions. And then I make a statistical analysis of demography, talking about firstly about the population and the age. This is an analysis of demography about the education and the socioeconomic status, and finally of the citizens distributions. For my project report, I firstly talk about philosophy. So, over the next few decades, more and more people will migrate to cities, and with the growing number of urban dwellers come many challenges, such as congestion and pollution. So, in this vision, suburban districts will continue to exist, and suburban living continues to appeal to many owners, and people will still want to live in them. So, a redesign of them is needed. But times are changing, and developers are responding with extensive infrastructure retrofits that encourage new growth in older neighborhoods and smarter growth in new neighborhoods. From a urban standpoint, a balance of supply and demand of workplaces is needed. In particular, town squares are the pulsating heart of a community, and more new public plazas and transforming squares are emerging all around the world as a sustainable way to enhance urban livability. So they are meeting points put together for social, cultural, and political activities. And the reemerge of the public square provides new anchor to suburban development. So why are suburban retrofits such as a good solution? How to retrofit a suburban area through an eco square? In this research is explored what type of innovation are helping suburban districts to become more sustainable and livable. The first step is a master plan of the select area of Kartal district, one of the districts that have the largest industrial area of Istanbul. So here we can see the master plan with some area that I selected. For example, this area that can be a recreation area, and also this area that can be the Eco Square. So I developed in particular the Eco Square, and these are the first sketches of the idea. And the project aims to retrofit the suburban district of Kartal through a square that supports the principles of sustainability related to environmental, society, and economy. So the new square has a central location and is surrounded by sport, shopping, and residential building. It has an area of 14,000 square meters and is divided into 4 main areas intended for different types of users through a double pedestrian and bicycle path. The area can be divided as follows. This is program summary. So, for example, firstly, we can have the playground area that includes 2 different plays areas. One containing games designed for children aged 3 and 6, and the other one for children aged 6 from 6 to 12. They can play on different texture on pavement and for example rubber flooring and soil stabilized. And the idea is to revitalize the area, creating an inclusive playground to be comfortable and safe for the citizens and in particular for the families, providing shady and rest seating areas with different trees resistant to air pollution to improve the functionality, the aesthetics aspect, and the biodiversity. Another area is the sport area. This area can be considered as a meeting point for the young community that include an outdoor basketball court, increasing social interaction and integration between citizens, and contain also several outdoor gym station with benefits such as, for example, free choice of when and where to work out, being in contact with nature, and allow us to consume more calories. Another area is this one, area for elderly and relaxed area. It includes a vegetable garden of aromatic herbs managed by the citizens, and to understand the importance of protecting common goods. It's also present a greenery relaxation area with covered and semi-covered seating and surrounded by a selection of trees and shrubs, giving an ornamental value, but also increasing the biodiversity and reduce the city's urban intolerance effect and air and noise pollution. Another important area is the recreative area. So here is present an impressive basin dug into the ground that is used during the dry season as an amphitheater that can host outdoor theater, relaxation, and meeting activities, while during the rainy season it collects rainwater from the immediate surroundings and redirects it to a percolating reservoir so that it either penetrates and restores the underground waters or is used for the irrigation system of the entire square. In square are also present 3 solar bicycle sharing points, um, in which people can rent the bicycle. So it's useful for residents, but also for people coming from outside, to increase the use of not motorized vehicles and reduce traffic congestion, and also help reduce harmless emissions. Then here we can see some technical drawings. This is the plan of the total areas. And here we can see the biclimatic section and the fourth section of the area. So about the ecological application. Firstly, we can talk about the flora. As I said, are present in the area some trees, evergreen trees, like Acer campestre and Platinus orientalis, and some deciduous trees, like the Celtis australis, and also fruit trees and shrubs. Then, in the area of playgrounds, is present a rubber flooring, in which wet poor floors are the most commonly used type of flooring in outdoor recreation environments to create a safe area for children. And the benefits can be, for example, the impact absorption and customized color and design and sleep resistant. Another important point are the solar bicycle sharing point. So we can say that photovoltaic bicycle shelters are a solution whose task is not only to protect vehicles from rain and snow, but also to generate electricity that can be used for public lighting in the square, contributing to improved environmental protection. This is the soil stratigraphy for bicycle and pedestrian paths. Um, we have the permeable pavement composed by grass or by drained wet mat for bicycle. And then here we can see the particular of the rainwater collector. Here. So we can say that the ecological application regards the environmental sustainable because there is accessibility for sun and wind comfort, so to improve the air quality through vegetation that can clean water, air, but also provide climate regulation like reducing the urban heat island effect. And all these application regards also the social sustainable because contribute to a community reference point, enhancing the attractiveness of a site or neighborhoods and serving as a source of pride for the community. And also regards economically sustainable because reduce inflow and infiltration into server lines otherwise bounded by increased costs of wear, tear, and repair. And finally, these are some view of the total area. In particular, we can see the sport area, the playground area, and the bicycle sharing point with the pedestrian and bicycle path. Here we can see some view of the relax area and then the elderly area with some covered sitting area and semi-covered, and with the view on the vegetable garden. So I can say that in this report, the concept of sustainability applied to suburban environment of a city was analyzed. We can understand that the environmental, social, and economical sustainability is a focal point in the current days. And suburban tissue is important because it provides a cleaner picture of the dynamic of the built environment of the suburbs, where different tissues uh, change at a different rate and scales. So, sustainability principles should be integrated into urban planning, creating an environmental awareness for the professionals but also for the users. And certainly, one of the public space that has been used since antiquity and that can contribute to the re-emerge of suburban district is the public square, which must represent the heart of the city identity and the meeting space for its users. So, urban public squares are more than just physical spaces. As I said, they have symbolic meaning for people. They are vibrant, active, and interesting places. In addition, most of the contemporary urban squares involve a historical value or importance for the community, as well as for tourists and visitors. So we should realize that urban public squares are essential for enhancing city image and community development. Finally, we can see some references for this report. And so this is all. Thanks for the attention.